This is For the Rest of Us with Canon Megan and Adam, a podcast about theology, faith, the Bible, and life. You know, for the rest of us. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to For the Rest of Us. As you can tell, as you probably figured out, if you've been listening to the show for any period of time, I am not the Reverend Megan Castellan. I am still just Adam Eichelberger. I work with Megan at the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. I'm a lifelong Catholic, now a baby Episcopalian. I'm still just trying to figure this all out, and I'm hoping that Megan can help me make some sense out of some things, and maybe for all of us, you know, like Christianity for the rest of us. Anyway, you can consider me like the Frank Reynolds.
You guys all think I'm a hero, and I'll accept that responsibility.
To her, Charlie Kelly.
We're itching like a hound to give you something you want.
And It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And we're just trying to look at things like life and faith through the lens of the Episcopal Church. And Megan, when you brought up this topic for me, this is something that is near and dear to my heart as a cradle Catholic, because this is something that I feel like we as Catholics had a monopoly on for the longest time. And I'm going to be really honest, I didn't even know that this was a thing when it came to being Episcopalian, but it was revealed to me that it was. And without any further ado, Megan, what are we figuring out better today for the rest of us?
Exorcisms, baby!
Fantastic. So I love leaning into the weird of Christianity because there's so much weird stuff about being a Christian. And this is definitively one of the weirdest topics that we have to talk about is exorcisms. And the fact that we do them is awesome. So, Megan, teach us all a little something about exorcisms.
So I was kind of batting around doing this idea, and then I saw what is perhaps the greatest article ever written, because I have a soft spot for news stories that sound like Mad Libs. And I came across an article that had the title something like Denver Seminary Promises No Ordinands Took Oaths to the Yeti in Controversial Statement.
That sounds like something that like you ask AI to create a headline for you. And that is absurd.
So
And when you told me about this, I looked it up and this is bananas. But yes, I want to dig into this.
So we will put the link to the article in the show notes. Basically, what appears to have happened is a seminary class of Roman Catholic seminarians went on a ski trip of some kind. And in the middle of the night, they were awoken by someone wearing a Yeti mask and encouraged to participate in some sort of esoteric ritual involving grizzly bear blood. Again, Mad Libs. And then footage of this event leaked out because someone was filming, and then all hell broke loose, figuratively and metaphorically, for the archdiocese. And then an investigation happened, and lots of craziness then did unfurl. And so that sealed it. I decided we needed to talk about exorcisms because one of the things that happened in the fallout of this event was that the diocese insisted that nothing satanic was happening. Satan! And then apparently they brought in an exorcist to cleanse the students just in case, which is just, I love every bit of it. I want to say from the jump that I have some sympathy for the seminarians and for kind of the beginning of this really weird debacle. Seminary is where you are supposed to try out your awful ideas that you come up with as a wannabe clergy person. And it's also where you're supposed to discover that they're really bad. And then you learn never to do them again. Seminary is where you're supposed to discover that most of your ideas are bad, and it prevents you from trying them out on actual people. So you're supposed to experiment and like get it out of your system. That's what we mean when we talk about formation in seminary. It's that you try all your bad ideas and then you stop it.
Stop it. Get some help.
Just as an aside, and I'm speaking strictly as a man here, this entire scenario that you described, and again, you will see the link to the story. This is exactly what happens when you put a bunch of men out in the wilderness and just don't have any, like, there's no women to
Yeah.
supervise their behavior. This is exactly what happens.
Yeah, the whole thing reads as, like, incredibly closed community that didn't have any sort of, like, outsiders coming in and going, "Hey, hey, what's up?" I mean, my seminary had a legendary story about experimenting with a Broadway mass in the '60s that is now only memorialized in one person's doctoral thesis and sort of angry letters from bishops at the time. Apparently, the students were experimenting with using more popular music in place of hymns and mass settings. And so they replaced all of the mass settings with secular Broadway songs. And the one that stands out to me is that they used the song Food, Glorious Food from Oliver as the offertory. And everyone was like, this is awful. This is a horrible idea. And it died there. Like, it's not a good idea. No one's going to like it. Please don't do it. Was it a good idea? No. Was it a bad idea? Oh God, yes. But am I glad that they got it out of their systems in seminary and it wasn't inflicted on like the faithful in St. Swithin's in the swamp in some like struggling suburban parish? Oh yes. It's what seminary's for. You like get it out of your system. And, we also had a tradition of like chapel pranks. Your class would come up with a joke that you would do at an appointed evensong. Everybody would be in on it. Everybody would know what you were doing. And it was like a way to blow off steam. One of the things that seems to have happened in this case is this closed community thing where there was such an emphasis on a lack of transparency, not telling the right people about the fact that it was a joke. And so the level of opaqueness and obfuscation that kind of seem endemic to the system is the thing that seems really toxic. Not necessarily a guy in a Yeti mask with grizzly blood, but just a lack of transparency through the whole thing. So strangely, this is actually a super good segue into what exorcisms are in the Anglican tradition, because we do have exorcisms. We literally have a service that you can look up in the Book of Occasional Services that says on exorcisms. And it's a bit of a misdirect. If you buy the Book of Occasional Services and you open it to that page, it says this long thing about historical context and how we've always practiced the ministry of deliverance. And then it says, and now call your bishop. And doesn't tell you what to do. It just says, call your bishop. But, you best not be messing around with this on your own. This is not something to play with. And the idea is we do believe in exorcisms. We take this extremely seriously. But like most other Anglican things, this is something that needs community. You do not Lone Ranger your way through this. You do not decide that someone is possessed of an evil spirit and treat them accordingly. You call in the entire village, often literally. Trained experts. The bishop generally will call other bishops. There's like a whole thing. And you're also not supposed to entirely know who the exorcism people in your diocese are. So each diocese is supposed to have an appointed exorcist. And you're not really supposed to know who that is. Again, because this is so serious and not something that you play around with.
I will say that just in hearing you say all this, this is where like a lot of the overlap with the Roman Catholic Church kind of lies. Because, I mean, for those who are uninitiated, the 30-second overview is like in the Catholic Church, this is not something that's taken lightly, just like in the Episcopal Church. There is like a really formal investigation process that has to happen. There needs to be consultation with like medical doctors and psychiatric and psychological professionals. Then it gets escalated to the bishop's office, who then appoints basically a special investigator who is oftentimes the actual exorcist for a diocese. And then once all these boxes get checked, then there's a very specific set of rules that have to be followed for an actual exorcism. So this is good because, again, and we do these things because it's not something to be taken lightly. And I think that because maybe we as people have a propensity to be like, something bad is going on here, it has to be a demon.
Yeah.
And we jump right to the extreme. But I digress. Continue.
Here's where I want to kind of get into what we talk about when we talk about exorcisms, because exorcisms are really present in popular culture and they're also really present in other parts of American culture. So I want to name that in more charismatic traditions, exorcisms are done all the time. Also in non-Western cultures, exorcisms are really prevalent. I worked in Kansas City, Missouri. We had a large West African population. We would get phone calls asking for sort of routine exorcisms. I got a call from a woman once whose mother-in-law had cursed her, and she wanted that fixed. For her, that was that was her worldview, and that was very customary. And so for people who are not in a kind of white Western worldview, this is a really common way to talk about certain aspects of the world. So I want to kind of like name that because sometimes for us, and by us I mean, other white middle class people raised in a Christian context, exorcisms can feel like that doesn't exist, not a real thing, or something out of the movies.
The power of Christ compels you.
But I think we need to start with exorcisms are definitely something that's in the Bible, right? Jesus did them all the time. And they are distinct from the healings, right? So he would heal blind people, lepers, things like that. Exorcisms, though, kind of fall into a different category. There's a number of occasions in each gospel where Jesus would confront someone possessed by demons. It's described like that. He would call out the fact that there was a demonic thing happening, and he would cast out the demon. The demon would usually recognize him, and so there's a truth-telling happening, and then Jesus would cast out the demon, freeing the person from this alien force that had invaded their personality. Again, if you are used to being a very smart, scientific 21st century person, this may sound bonkers. And also, think about watching someone with untreated mental illness, or someone with substance use disorder, or even someone having a PTSD flashback. That experience of watching someone whom you know well, all of a sudden, a switch flips and this person that you knew is sort of overtaken by a personality that seems entirely alien to them and that is destructive to everything they want, everything that is good for them, everything that is good for the community. On some level, that is what is being described, that there is this sort of overtaking by this sort of negative force, and the person is not in control of it. And it seems sort of like supernatural because, again, if you're a first century person, you have no idea what's going on. One of the kind of really clear examples of this, a number of the demons are described as causing seizures. And so if you're a first century person in Palestine, you have no idea what epilepsy is. All you see is this, beloved child of God. All of a sudden, a switch flips and they are no longer there somehow. They're unconscious, they're kicking and they're screaming, they're falling into things they shouldn't be falling into, they are choking and they are almost dead, and you don't know how to stop it, if it will stop. You don't know what it is. And so one of the ways we can think about demonic possession is the experience of sort of being dramatically and suddenly overtaken by a sort of negative part of your personality, negative aspect of something that you have not fully integrated into your conscious being, whether that is a psychological thing or whether that is a sort of physical manifestation of illness. And what Jesus does time and again in healing is name what is happening, and in that naming, reconcile what is happening. So always the person is brought back into the community. Always the person is able to rejoin their family. Jesus is the reconciler of the divide. And so if we think about the gospel stories as describing this phenomenon of this deep divide that happens a lot with people, whether people are living in denial about something that's creeping out elsewhere, whether people are struggling with mental illness that's untreated, whether people are struggling with something else that's not treated and is beyond them, Jesus comes in, names what's happening, names the truth, and enables them to integrate that truth into their wholeness and into the wholeness of the community. The idea of wholeness being the path to restoration and healing is a superscriptural idea. Shalom, the Hebrew word for peace, is another way of saying wholeness. All of the purity laws in Leviticus kind of center around the idea of being whole, being unbroken, being unblemished. So then when we talk about exorcisms, we are less talking about like a real life supernatural episode and more talking about helping people work through these sorts of internal divides, which happen a lot. If you think about the way we tend to experience denial, if you think about the way secrets happen in abusive family systems, in addictive family systems, if you think about the way our larger society works in failing to tell the truth and then repent and repair of that truth, that sort of dynamic leads to a lot of harm. And often harm that we aren't conscious is connected to the thing that we weren't telling the truth about. And so that is more what we're talking about when we're talking about exorcisms. Most often, 99% of the time, when somebody calls the church, and they do call, like this is the other thing, this happens. People will call and say, something weird's going on in my house. I think if I have demons, I need the house to be blessed. Or I've seen something strange a couple nights.
Who you gonna call?
I need you to come with holy water and pray over my house. Or I'm not this kind of person, but I think something's going on with my husband. Like doors and stuff are flying open everywhere and I need something to happen. Most of the time, 99% of the time, if you go and you talk to them for like 5 minutes, what you find out is that more than likely there is something that someone is not saying that needs to be said. It's time to tell the truth about, mom's drinking. It's time to tell the truth about abuse that happened a long time ago and now it needs to come out. There is something that is ready to be told that has not been told yet. And when you do that and start getting everyone the help to integrate that, probably through therapy, possibly through actually treating mental illness or physical illness that hasn't been treated up until then the haunting dissipates because you aren't carrying that weight of the secret and the denial anymore. 9 times out of 10, that's what's going on. And so when we get those calls, we do like what you said, Adam. Then we call the therapists, then we call the doctors and we say, hey, I think something's going on here. Because Jesus was absolutely correct when he said the truth will set you free. Turns out he was right about a remarkable number of things.
I mean, it's also important to remember, like, I don't think either of us or the church at large is trying to deny the idea that there is a component of our lives that reaches beyond what we understand. There are things, and when we use the word supernatural in this context, we're not trying to play into like a sensationalized Hollywood version of that. But what we're saying is that there is a reality that we absolutely experience as human beings. And then there absolutely is one that kind of stretches beyond what we do. And no one is trying to downplay the fact that that is a reality, that does exist. But I think at the same time, you're absolutely right. Like sometimes we look at the words of Jesus or the actions of Jesus as these very kind of big universal truths, but also it's very practical. When Jesus says the truth will set you free, he's saying that there are very real temporal consequences for being dishonest, for lying, for holding secrets, and that those things take a toll. And I think that speaks to what it actually means to be a part of the church. Like you said, it takes a village.
Yeah.
Wanting people to be whole people. Like we talked about this on Bishop Deedee's podcast when we talk about what the word holy means, what holiness is.
Yeah.
That's what we mean by that. Like, hey, no one's trying to discount your lived experience. At the same time, let's get to the root of what's going on here. And I think sometimes people think that like if we don't just jump right to like blessed salts and holy water, that we're trying to say like you're crazy. But no, what the church is trying to say is like, we care about you so much that we want to exhaust all of these options.
Yeah. Well, and also the temporal stuff is somehow more powerful than often we think. The sort of this is going to sound really woo, but the cracks and the damage that failing to live in the truth cause is really bad. I mean, there's a reason that all of our horror movies in the American cinema tend to talk about, oh, this house was built on an Indian burial ground. Yeah, you remember what we did to the Native Americans? That was really bad. We should probably talk about it, but we don't. And so instead, what happens? You build a house on top of it, and your house is haunted and everyone dies. I mean, that kind of narrative way of expressing this real rot that we can't get beyond. I mean, there is a real spiritual and moral consequence to not telling the truth. And so I think, both things are true. Sometimes the solution is just go to therapy. But also, that's a huge solution with huge spiritual consequences. If you can be brave enough to name the truth and live into it, that has enormous spiritual repercussions because you are setting the world closer to the dream that God has for it and not kind of subsisting in this built world of denial that we are so often asked to live in, which takes so much time and so much energy and is exhausting.
Not to drill too much more down into this, but even when we talk about things like possessions in homes, or we talk about seeing ghosts or spirits, sometimes in these kinds of circumstances, and again, we're not trying to take away from anyone else's lived experience, but a lot of times when we have unaddressed grief or trauma, our bodies and our minds are way more powerful than I think that we realize. And these things can manifest themselves in ways that are so tangible and so powerful that it bears a moment to like take a step back and really look at it and work with people who want you to be able to address those things. And I think that that's what the church is trying to do. I do know, and this is something that you brought up when we were doing prep for this, that there's also like a really kind of common way that exorcisms are used.
Yeah.
And it's really not great, but I feel like it bears discussion in this.
Yeah.
And with trigger warning for some folks, I'll let Megan get into this, but this is not great. And we're going to talk about it. And we don't see this so much within our tradition,
Yeah.
but we do see this in a lot of Christian churches, especially here in the United States and in some other countries. But Megan, I'll let you get into this. Why don't you kind of unpack how exorcisms can also be used in a not great way?
Yeah. So we framed exorcisms as a way to kind of name the truth and integrate the truth. And I said earlier that one of the places exorcisms are really frequently relied upon is in the charismatic Christian tradition, particularly among more conservative Christians. I am aware that one of the frequent uses of exorcisms in that tradition is to exorcise gayness out of people. That is incredibly, incredibly abusive. Period, full stop. And I hope you understand by this point at the podcast just how backwards and evil it is to do that. If the whole point of Jesus's healing ministry is to enable us to live into the truth and to be whole people, how abusive is it to tell someone that a part of who they are is in fact evil and needs to be repressed further? The damage done by weaponized exorcisms is incredible. I've talked to people who've survived these. It's really awful. And I want to be really clear that weaponizing exorcisms like this is not of God, is horrible, and should not be done. Exorcisms should not be used to remove a part of who people are. Ultimately, any healing ministry is about naming the truth and allowing people to live into it in greater fullness. And when you're fostering denial
is a river in Egypt.
Or encouraging denial, that's the reverse of healing. That's more harming. Don't do that. I don't even have any more to say, except there are a lot of people I wish I could kick. And I don't get to kick them because I'm a priest. And
Right.
also, I try and follow my baptismal covenant, which says no kicking of people I don't like.
It's somewhere in there.
It's somewhere in there.
I can't remember exactly what line it says, but it's somewhere in there that we're not allowed to kick people in the shins for their bad takes
Sadly.
on on what demonic possession actually is.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about is, there is the 1% where if all else isn't working, then we do use ritual, house blessings, people blessings. I've never been a part of a full exorcism, but I have done house blessings. One of the reasons ritual is effective, and it's one of the reasons we really don't want to mess around with this, is that ritual kind of scratches an itch in the human psyche in a particular way. I have a friend who's a trauma therapist, and he talks about the way our brain develops. The first thing that develops is our kind of primal feeling sense when we're little babies, and the first thing we know is how to survive. And so all of our input is like feeling based. And we basically know, okay, I'm feeling like I'm going to die. No, I'm feeling like I'm going to live. Okay, die, live, die, live. And that's all like really basic primal stuff. And then as we develop, we get our cerebral cortex. And so we start to process what those feelings were. We come up with stories and reasons for what those feelings are. But the feelings we first experienced are hardwired in. And so when we experience feelings later in life, it triggers that I'm going to die feeling, regardless of what story we're telling ourselves. And we just come up with reasons for the I'm going to die feeling. He said, what you try and do in trauma therapy is work in the middle space like art therapy, play therapy, EMDR, where you're in a liminal space touching both your conscious logical processing and your really primal feeling self. Because your consciousness can't really work down. It's just coming up with reasons for these feelings you have. But when you work in that middle space, it touches both. And so it can slowly start to reshape the way your brain has hardwired what you're feeling and why. I would add that ritual also works in that middle space. Ritual is creative enough and surpasses our conscious understanding. So it can be really, really powerful. It's also why we don't want to play with it, because you don't want to ritualize something that's going to move somebody in the wrong direction. People are pretty fragile when they're in liturgy, and so you don't want to like shove them off down the wrong way. But there are times when hearing the absolution in liturgy is more powerful than just someone saying, you know, God forgives you, right? Because it's ritualized. You hear the rhythm, you see it with everyone else, you do the motions, and that hits a different level. And so there are times when what people need is the ritual of, we are blessing this house. Here's the salt. Here's the water. This place is safe. Everything has been cleansed. You are safe. This part of you that you were afraid of has been welcomed back in. And we name it and we know it and it's okay. That can be incredibly powerful, particularly for people who have been in deep denial, often as the last stage. If you've done all your work to kind of have like a capper, that really is a good way to finish. So I don't want to say that ritual does not have a place. The prayers do, and the prayers and the stuff is really powerful. But it's also another reason why we don't want to play with it, because it is so powerful. It's kind of like handing someone ayahuasca and being like a white hippie dude on the beach. No, if you're gonna take ayahuasca, and I'm not recommending this, but you want to go with like a shaman who is from the tribe that reveres ayahuasca and knows what they're doing, and you want to make sure you don't have any untreated mental illnesses that it's going to open up and like rot your brain. Like you want to like not mess with it because it's going to do a whole thing.
I mean, not to get too tangential, but I mean, when when we do that kind of like when Aaron Rodgers goes and does like ayahuasca treatment, that's a little bit of imperialism.
Yeah,
That's a little
don't
bit
do
of
that.
colonialism. Don't do that. Don't appropriate other people's cultures.
Don't be that guy.
Don't steal people's stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like we have our own weird, trippy stuff. Don't steal people's stuff. Also, it's not for you. Like and Aaron Rodgers definitely is gonna have some stuff that it's gonna melt his brain. Like I don't feel confident sending him on an ayahuasca trip.
And the other thing too, and the one of kind of the last thing that stood out to me when you talk about the importance of ritual, like there is a deep value in the formality of ritual. And I think that sometimes we, as both Christians and people who try and seek an intellectual understanding of things, we want to throw formality out because formality is archaic and dated. And I don't know what made me think of this, but this is my closing thought. And you will appreciate this, Megan, because something in my brain flipped about a week and a half ago. And now I'm on a big kick of rewatching The West Wing.
Ah, yes.
And I noticed that President Bartlett is constantly walking this line between being Jed Bartlett and then doing the very formal things that a president needs to do. And I found myself getting very emotionally invested in the times where he has to use the formal language of being the president.
Yeah.
Like when he's saying, hereby affixing my signature to blah, 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 or like the episode where he has to invoke the 25th Amendment and cede control over to the Speaker of the House. Like these very formal moments, it's like, oh, this is something I pay attention to. It's like when we go to mass, when we're in liturgy, where there's these formal prayers, especially the prayer of absolution that we pray together. This formality draws something out of us. It kind of draws us to attention. Like, oh, like I'm paying attention here. It's like when I was Catholic during the prayer of consecration, there's bells that get rung to get your attention, to like pay attention to the thing. And I think for me, it serves as a reminder that this is an important thing and it's something that is valuable and we don't take it lightly. Not
Yeah.
to make it like super serious, because in all reality, the process of exorcism, when we're coming back to our original topic here, Adam, is not like we see in the movies where it's like
Right.
somebody levitating off a bed or a head spinning around or, all the other things that we make synonymous with this. But this level of formality, it has a purpose and we don't just kind of use it flippantly.
Well, and it also reminds us that this is beyond us.
Uh-huh.
Like it's not something that I'm doing. It's something that God is doing. It's bigger than us. that can be helpful, particularly if you're feeling super vulnerable, which in these really important liturgies often happens. There's a liturgy I have used a fair amount around surviving childhood abuse for people who have really struggled with the kind of lingering effects of that. And it's a really beautiful liturgy. One of the powerful things about it is a group comes together and names with the person that God did not will that to happen to them. God has brought them through it. God is continuing to heal them. And the good things that are coming in their life are from God. And God is piecing them back together, and God has helped them to survive. And that is an incredibly powerful thing to watch unfold, particularly for people who feel so incredibly vulnerable and then get to see a community gathering around them and affirm for them, what they already consciously know is true, but they need to feel it on an emotional level, sort of all the way down. And also for the community to kind of represent God for them in that moment. And it's stuff like that that is sort of the more realistic aspect of healing ministry than, a girl on a bed with her head spinning around and spewing green goop.
Well, I don't know about you, listener, but for me, this has actually been like a whole lot and actually super helpful. And I think that these kinds of conversations are good because it demystifies these big things that oftentimes we really don't have an understanding of. And that's kind of what part of this whole journey is getting a better understanding of these things. So, Megan, as always, we need your recommendations, and not to make too light of the subject that we just talked about, but you and I are of a similar age and we like kind of similar things. And I don't know about you, but I had a little bit of a period in my life where I got like super deep into like horror movies. So with this topic in mind, is there a horror movie or even one that deals with the topic of exorcism? I'm not trying to make light of exorcism, but these things come up in the zeitgeist. Is there one that, and remember, if you make a recommendation, this is viewer discretion advised. What, if any, is there a recommendation you can give us for like a good horror or scary movie?
So I'm a total wimp. I can't do horror movies, like at all. I'm the worst. But Get Out would be as close as I get.
Get Out's a good one. I think for me, if I was going to make a recommendation, because I mean, not like my recommendation carries any weight because I'm not a priest, like Canon Megan, but I would say, I remember the last time one really jarred me, and this is going to date me, is the Blair Witch Project. I remember seeing that, and I saw it in a movie theater, and I was like, holy cow, this is bananas. But there you go.
Yeah.
There's your recommendations, listener. Do us a favor on your way out the door. Make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast, and get in the comments. Leave us a review. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think of the show. And remember, the power of Christ compels you to do so.
That's right.
We thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you next time on For the Rest of Us. Thanks for stopping by and checking out For the Rest of Us with Canon Megan. If you like the show, maybe subscribe, share it with a friend, leave us a review, and we hope to see you again next time. For the Rest of Us is a production of the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York.